When I said we've evolved faster than our nervous systems were designed for, we have to update our operating systems. And biology will do that in hundreds of years, but by the time it does, we will have already needed to adapt to a whole other slew of challenges that we can't even foresee yet. So that's why it's really about a practice. It's developing these skills over time, making subtle shifts in your thinking and your behavior, so that you're not spending your life reacting. You're taking back some control.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Sean Trey Show. I'm actually Sean, in case you didn't realize that, and I have an awesome guest with me today. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do, it would be amazing.
Sure. I am Ann Grady. I am an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, but mostly I am just part of this whole experimentation we call life and navigating it like everybody else.
Right. I love that because we are all navigating it and we are doing our best to get through. I had a long day and I was trying to onboard some new workers for my team. And then there was stress with family, and then there was this and that, and there was worries, and then I wasn't feeling so good. And then I just sat down for these podcasts. I have 2 podcasts tonight. And the last one I finished and I felt energized after. And because it's just a beautiful thing to be able to connect with people and to hear stories. But one of the keys for me is like, I just have to remember to keep getting back up. One of my favorite books is the book Make Your Bed by Admiral William McRaven.
Yeah.
And I love that because I deal with a lot of anxiety. I deal with massive amounts of anxiety almost every day. I wake up and I feel anxiety. And in those moments, I realize I just tell myself, it's time to make your bed. And I just get up and keep going. And the day flows and there are beautiful points throughout it, but it just takes me getting up and getting going.
Yeah, I hear you. I was diagnosed with clinical depression at the age of 19. And so the irony of a depressed motivational speaker is not lost on me. But that's why I'm so passionate about the work I do, because happiness isn't a trait you're born with, it's a skill. Yeah. And we're not supposed to be happy all the time, right? Anxiety serves a purpose. Fear, sadness, grief, they all have their place. But we have a lot more control over our emotions and our life than I think sometimes we think we do.
I love that. You write about resilience and talk about it a lot, but what is resilience in plain English? Because it's like the catchword these days for people that want to resilience and the resilience mindset. But what is it for why does it matter so much for people today?
Resilience is really not just your ability to get back up after you've been knocked down, whether it's a small challenge at work or it's a huge challenge like loss of a loved one, right? Your resilience is your innate ability to recover from setbacks. But it goes beyond that. It's your ability to extract meaning, to figure out how you use that adversity as a catalyst to get stronger. And, I've spent the last 25 years trying to build the skills of resilience. I've written about it. I've done 2 TEDx talks about it. I speak about it all over the world. But lately, I've learned that there's more to life than just resilience. There's more than just bouncing back. We have to grow forward. That's why I wrote my new book, Evolvability, and why I'm so passionate about these skills, because, we're going to evolve one way or another. The question is whether we do it by design or default.
I love that. There is this, whether we're going to do it by design or default. I was talking in my last podcast, it was my financial podcast. I was having a guest on my Growing Money podcast. I've got a lot of podcasts. I'm weird like that. I've got 4 of them.
I think it's great.
Yeah, right. All of them have different types of conversations I love to have. But one of the things that we were talking about was, especially with personal finance, was transitioning from reactivity to intentionality. And there's this idea of you can be constantly reacting. I'm resilient, whack. I'm resilient, whack. I'm resilient, whack. And you're like, oh man, maybe.
And haven't we all felt like that?
Right?
Bam.
I've been there, man. Today, I had a major thing with one of my workers. We're having this huge holiday come up. Everyone's getting 10 days off for the Lunar New Year. And someone's like, can I get the week off as well? before? And I was just like, and she did it in front of all of my other workers. And it was just like, and it made me go, oh man, I don't know how to say, because if I say yes, I'm a bad guy. If I say no, I'm a bad guy. And that was on top of something that happened 5 minutes before.
But isn't it crazy? Like, if all of that was happening and then God forbid something happened to your wife and you got a call, like something major happened to your wife, right? None of that shit would matter anymore.
None of it would matter.
Right? It's so crazy how sometimes the stressors that we have feel so overwhelming in the moment. Right. And in the bigger context, right? Like, I mean, I've been a worrier and a anxious stressor all my life. And then I had my son, Evan. And that changed everything, because Evan is severely mentally ill and autistic and has developmental delays. And I mean, everything from extreme aggression to the inability to regulate emotion. And I mean, he's 22 years old now, right? So it was physical violence, it was hospitalizations, it was psychiatric wards and residential treatment centers. And in the middle of all of that, Sean, I ended up with a tumor in my salivary gland that resulted in facial paralysis and a whole bunch of other health stuff. And at the time, I kept telling myself, if only this is better, if only everything could be better, then I'll never worry about the little stuff. I'll never stress about the little stuff, right? I promised myself, if my face comes back, if my son is okay, if my daughter's safe, my husband and I are well, like that's the big stuff, right? But I found almost immediately I was right back to being anxious and stressed about the little stuff. And it's easy to live there, especially in the world we live in, because it's changing faster than our nervous systems were designed to keep up. And so that's where the skills come in. Nobody is born great at this. You have to practice it.
I love that, because so many people think that I'm going to get from point A to point B and then everything's going to be okay. But they don't realize once you get to point B, there's going to be a whole new host of things that you have to worry about. And then you get to C, and there's a whole new host of things you have to worry about. And like, that's especially true with like people who talk personal finance. Like, oh, if I only get this much money, and they get to that much money, and they're still stressed and they still have worry, you know? And it's like, I love that you're talking about that, because I feel like it's kind of that present moment awareness at the same time too, that happiness, feelings of safety is not out there. It's here. It's here in this mix of surrender and hope and alignment, and a little bit of like a belief of like, even if things are not okay, what can I control? Like that whole dichotomy of control, like getting your power back. I sat there today and I realized, wow, with my workers, like, you're right, I was getting my perspective. And then I said, you know what? We're not going to let this affect the day. So I ordered a bunch of pastries, and everyone took the lunch break. And after lunch, I brought in all these pastries and I said, guys, we're just going to have a great day today. And everyone was like super enjoyed. We had a great finish up to the day. And it was this, and I had communication with everyone. And it was like, my point being, you can change up the energy. You can change up the direction. You can change the way you're approaching things, because when you're getting whack, 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 and still getting up, you can still be suffering, or you can be whack, 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 and go, wow, that was time 32, and have that amusement and that lightheartedness to it, and find that joy.
The trick is the how, though, right? So that's where I find a lot of it's missing, and why I've been so passionate about this work for the last 25 years is because, I've been to a million therapists who say, you get to choose your outlook. You can control what you focus on. You can manage the anxiety. You can do that. But nobody talks about how. And so after digging into neuroscience for Evan's entire life to try to figure out how to work with his brain, I learned so much about the rest of our brains and the how behind creating that life, right? It's nobody ever has sunshine and roses. I'm not out high-fiving sunbeams, right? Like, challenging stuff happens. You can hear my donkey braying outside. Like, noise canceling microphone does not work to hide a donkey. I don't know if you just heard that, but they're skills. That's really all it is. That's the book, the new book, Evolvability, is just 6 skills. It's 6 pillars, and each skill builds on the next. But, you know, I'll give you an example. You said you've struggled with anxiety your whole life, and I can definitely relate. You know, stress and anxiety, for example, are physical sensations. They're
Yep.
not mental, they're physical. And so we're taught to think our way through them, but thinking your way through a physical sensation doesn't work. You have to feel your way out. So, like, that was a huge technique for me in learning how to feel my way out rather than getting caught up in that loop and continuing to feed it, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
What are, if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
what are some of the 6 steps? Can you talk to me about those?
Sure. Well, I love a good acronym. So, EVOLVE is a framework. It stands for the E is emotional aptitude. How do you read, recognize, and respond to your emotions in a way that supports your priorities? So you're intentionally moving through life instead of reacting with panic and profanity, although I've done that too. The V is values. How do you frame your decisions, your expectations, your resilience, and the things that really matter? So when everything around you is changing, you've got your compass and you can stay grounded. O is optimization. How do you optimize your most limited resources, your time, energy, and attention? L is leadership. We don't go through this life alone, and it's not by title, it's by influence. How do you bring people along for the ride, engage them, help uplift them in the process? Versatility is next. We have to adapt the way we think and behave based on the situation. Part of it starts with our belief system and our mindset. Part of it starts with the skill of being able to step out of our own perspective and look at others. And then finally, empowerment. You know, sometimes when you've tried everything, when you've hit every wall, when you have exhausted all your options, what's left isn't defeat, it's an invitation. And that invitation is to focus on where you can take back control. That's the most overlooked form of strength and adaptability. Accept what you have to work with instead of fighting the reality that is, or instead of fighting the reality that you wish you had. It's managing the one that is, but it's also learning how to take back some agency. Right. Like when we feel we have some sense of control, they did this study in a nursing home that still blows my mind. They take these 2 groups, right? They're elderly patients in nursing homes, and one has all their decisions made for them. And the other group is like, you know, gets to make little decisions, what time to eat, to care for their house plant, what they're going to do for the day, their activities. And they studied them. And so 3 weeks later, the group that had some choices had more energy and they were thinking more clearly. But 18 months later, the group that had some control had half the mortality rate as the other group. So it's not just that taking back control feels good, it also does good. It changes your brain. So these are all really science-backed. I don't want to say neuro hacks because I kind of don't like that term, but it's really ways to make your brain work for you rather than against you. Because left to its own devices, your brain will make you miserable. It's just trying to keep you alive, not happy.
I love that. It's spot on, you know, and you think about that. I was working with my daughter about not getting afraid of the dark. But then I was thinking about that. Like, there is a very clear biological purpose of being afraid of the dark.
Yep.
Big, dangerous, scary animals lurked in the dark, and they would go hunting, and this being afraid of the dark kept you alive. You know, the problem is when these deep fears continue on into the modern society, and that fear of that dangerous animal becomes the fear of the exam, or the fear of your boss, or the fear of something else.
Or the inbox waiting for you, right? Like, we have to teach so when I said we've evolved faster than our nervous systems were designed for, we have to update our operating systems. And biology will do that in hundreds of years, but by the time it does, we will have already needed to adapt to a whole other slew of challenges that we can't even foresee yet. So that's why it's really about a practice. It's developing these skills over time, making subtle shifts in your thinking and your behavior, so that you're not spending your life reacting. You're taking back some control.
100% agree. It's interesting because that control that we take back, it's a powerful tool, but it's kind of the part of your toolkit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because if you can find daily habits that allow you to do that, for me, one of the things is I have had to focus on one thing at a time. Like I do not do well with multitasking. And I tell my team when I'm like working on one thing, I'm like, this is what I'm working on right now. Let me get through this and I'll come and
Yeah.
give you my full attention. Because if I try to give you partial attention, it's partial. So for me, checklists, I and prioritizing my day,
Mhm.
and then, checklist, prioritizing my day and trying to do one thing at a time and figuring out what are the one or two things that are going to move the needle for me that day, are the
Yep.
things that allow me to get through it, and the daily habits that are allow me to make the most difference in my life. What are some things that you think are some great daily habits that make the biggest difference in helping people develop that resilience?
So I'm going to walk through the first three pillars, because I really think that if you can get a handle on these skills, your whole life will change. And the
Mm.
first is this emotional component of our lives. Change is not a logistical process, it's an emotional one. And most change fails not because we're difficult or don't care, but because our brain craves comfort, not transformation. So the first step is understanding how your emotions show up and how they affect your behavior, right? Because if you don't know how you show up, you let your internal emotions control your outward behavior. So one of the tools I use, there's a lot of ways that you can cultivate habits, but the best way to make them stick is to attach them to things you already do, right? So what's the one room you're going to use multiple times today, that I'll use multiple times today? It doesn't matter that we're in different countries. What's one room in the house that you and I know, like, as soon as we're done with this podcast, we're both going to go to?
Kitchen or bedroom, either of those.
Oh, I was thinking the bathroom, but maybe that's just my age.
That is true.
Maybe that's just my age. So, you have that natural break in your day anyway, you're going to go. So when you're washing your hands, look in the mirror and ask yourself, how am I feeling and how do I want to show up next? I call it a mirror moment. It's a quick way to take back control. You don't have to react to every thought you have, to every emotion you feel. Most of our thoughts are the equivalent of junk mail. Right? Just because it pops up, you don't have to give it the microphone. Just because the anxiety feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. Intense emotional reactions only last 90 seconds. After that, it's our thoughts that fuel it. So sometimes the hardest thing is the most effective, and that's just to sit in the suck. Instead of trying to race through it and not feel it and fight it, which increases it, sit in the suck. But that mirror moment for me is a way to check in with myself really regularly. It's a simple tool. It's a way to help be deliberate about how I want to show up to the Zoom meeting or the interview or the stage I'm about to walk onto or my living room, and how I'm going to communicate with my husband and my kids. The next is values. When everything around you is changing, or when life feels really, really chaotic, we usually default to fear or urgency or convenience. And those are not exactly recipes for growth. But who you are and what you stand for can stay consistent if you've taken the time to define it, right? So most of us, when we're feeling overwhelmed, the question is like, what do I do next? What's most, like, how do I move forward? And I've learned to reframe it into two really powerful questions. One is, what is most important right now? What is the value that I want to guide my behavior? Is it health? Is it family, faith, security, achievement, courage, whatever it is in that moment? What is most important? And then the follow-up to that is, which choices reflect that? Because when we're caught up in exhaustion or overwhelm or fear or anxiety, we make choices that at the moment seem right. But if we don't root them in what's most important, we end up off track. And then finally, this ability to optimize our resources. So you talked about multitasking, and I'm glad you mentioned that you don't think you're good at it, because none of us are. So you're really not multitasking. You're not technically doing two things at once. You're rapid task switching. You're going back and forth really rapidly. And each switch burns through glucose and oxygen, which is the fuel your brain needs, right? So every time you think you're being more productive, not only are you increasing errors and taking twice as long to complete the task, but you're training your brain for short bursts of attention instead of sustained focus. And just that leads to feeling of overwhelm and cognitive depletion. So doing one thing at a time, taking control of your tech so your phone doesn't take control of you. Like, here's a novel idea that is life-changing, and most people will gasp when I say it, but sleep with your phone in a different room and don't touch it for 30 minutes in the day, at the beginning of the day. Because the research shows that it just robs you of cognitive bandwidth. It actually stimulates your negativity bias, meaning you're likely to scan the world through the eyes of what's wrong rather than what's right. You're more likely to have less working memory, less emotional regulation. So things like that you can do, or for example, your energy. Most of us don't even think about how many decisions we make every day, what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, what to respond to. If you can eliminate even one of those choices, you save up brain power so that you're simplifying the little stuff so that you can focus on the important stuff. So these are just examples of some of the little daily micro habits that you can build. But the key is not to practice them all at once. The key is to pick one, integrate it into your day, get to the point where you don't even have to think about it anymore. That's when it's become a habit. And then you pick another one.
I studied judo and Japanese style jiu-jitsu. And I found that when we were training, we wouldn't do all the moves every day. We would do one move every day. And by doing one move every day, you did it again and again and again and again and again. And it got really hard, but at the same time, really repetitive. And then you started noticing something. It got to be a lot easier to do that one thing. And when you got into tough situations and we were starting to do like the sparring and we'd go up against another person, you'd get into a situation and suddenly you'd feel it. You were there and the move happened and it was effortless because you had been there. You had put in the reps and you would focus on one move at a time, and then you work another move and then you work another one. But everyone wants things all at the same time. And I see this in my financial podcast because I'm talking to financial experts and they're like, how do you get wealthy? And they're like, one step at a time. Like everyone's looking for the get rich quick scheme. Everyone's looking for how to do things fast. But lasting things, long-term things, really powerful things generally are slow. They generally happen at a step at a time, a piece at a time,
Yeah, you're 100% right. And whatever emotions or thoughts you have most often get stronger, just like any habit you have, right?
Yeah.
So if you're anxious a lot, that's what you're practicing. So whatever you're practicing grows, whether that's a judo move or whether that's an emotion or a thought, right? So it's paying attention to which of those habits are helping you and which ones are sabotaging you.
That's so powerful because people tend to think of habits, like the atomic habits. And of late, people are always thinking about these great habits that you establish for success. But there are just as many habits that are sabotaging you if you're not aware of them. And sometimes we do those even more thinking we're doing the right thing. Yeah. But then, that's one of the things too, that I think like a very healthy level of introspection is a really important thing for working through resilience, because it's like I'm always thinking about, whenever I think about resilience, I think about those toys from when I was a kid, those little whack-a-dolls that you hit the doll.
That's in my TED Talk. I have one of those in my TED Talk. We just did not anticipate it would spring a leak right before we went on stage. You saw the whole thing's wrapped in duct tape.
That's actually even more awesome, because even the bouncy doll had to have a little bit of resilience in itself too.
That's right.
You got to patch the thing up. But it's like, for me, when I'm dealing with resilience, I still think about like, why do I keep getting hit? I keep on getting knocked down, because one of the things that I found in judo is like, you get really good at getting back up. But there's a certain point in time where when you're falling down, you start to ask, what is it that's making me fall down? And then learning to adapt. And that's part of the resilience too, is to like sit there and go, okay, this thing here keeps tossing me for a loop. Maybe I'm going to try this instead, Yeah,
100%. And that's all life is. It's figuring out, how do I fall down less? How do I get back up stronger, faster, more prepared for the next thing? It you said this earlier. I think so often we're conditioned. My daughter's 24 right now, and she said to me the other day, "I can't wait till I'm 30. Everything will be easier." And I didn't mean to, but I completely laughed out loud. Like, I'm pretty sure I shot water out of my nose. We tend to think it'll get easier when, I'll be happier when, it'll calm down when.
Right.
And the goal, I feel like we're on this planet to learn how to manage ourselves in between the when, before the
Right.
when, right? Because if you're not okay where you are, there's a real good chance you're not going to be okay where you're going. We have to learn the skills to get there without crumbling every time our feelings get hurt or something challenging happens, because that stuff will happen. We have to go into it knowing that, prepared for that, not I'll be happy when that stops, because it's just a continuous ride we're on. That's really all it is.
I love that. You're right. You're on the roller coaster of life. People are screaming to get off, but you don't really want to get off, because if you do,
No,
the game's done,
right?
And instead it's about like learning to, how can I enjoy this ride? Because sometimes it's a bit of an intense ride.
Well, and sometimes you can step off that ride and go on the merry-go-round for a little bit, or a Ferris
Ye-
wheel. You don't have to
yes, you can.
stay on the roller coaster. I think sometimes we get addicted to busy and drama and chaos because
Right.
it's what we know. It's what's
And social
comfortable.
media glorifies it these days too.
Oh, 100%, right? It feeds into our need for that. Um, that's actually what was the impetus for writing Evolvability. Is I was a go 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 person, type A, overachiever my entire life, until my friends kidnapped me and made me go camping for a weekend. And
That's
I
awesome.
went kicking and screaming, and I would have rather had a colonoscopy than spend a weekend in the woods. But what I learned is that sometimes busy is a form of avoidance. The doing keeps us from the feeling. The doing keeps us from having to have the hard conversations. The doing keeps us from having to reflect on what really matters. So if you're in this chronic roller coaster ride of life, sometimes it's helpful to stop and ask yourself, what am I chasing? What am I racing toward? And what am I trying to avoid?
Oh, what am I trying to avoid? You reminded me of a story earlier, though, that I want to touch on really quick. And I firmly think that sometimes when our lives are falling apart, they're really falling into place. And sometimes it's that moment where you've got to sit there and let go and just sit there and go, wow, what's life trying to teach me? What am I learning right now? We were in Maui, and I was stuck in a job I didn't like. And my wife and we got away at a short vacation because this job I had didn't give me much time off. And I had to race back, and it was just like I hadn't seen my mom forever. And a family member has a house in Maui. They invested well, and they're just the most lovely and generous person. Like, anytime you want to come out, you can stay here with us. And I'm just, yeah, thank you. It's wonderful. We got there and we had this beautiful holiday, and we did it on a budget. It was really great, and we were getting ready to fly back, and I just wasn't ready to go. But it was time to go. I had to get back. I had to work. We got to the airport, and somehow the airline, when we had booked our ticket, put my name and my daughter's name down wrong. And they wouldn't let us board the plane. And we were all sitting there staring at them going, hey, we have tickets. They're like, yeah, well, it doesn't match your name. And because it doesn't match your name, you're not getting on this flight. And so we went home. There was no getting around it. They weren't going to let us on that plane. And we sat down, and I was just like, I called the airline, complained, and they were like, yeah, nothing we can do. You should have said something at the original booking, like the place that you checked in. They could have changed it there. We can't do anything now. And I'm not going to say the name of the airline, but they were horrible service. And we finally got to the point where I just was like, at that point, I was trying to find another flight back. There wasn't another flight for 5 days that was an affordable, reasonable price to get back to Asia. And I was just like, I looked at my wife, and she's like, well, then we're in Maui another 5 days. And I had been just focused on doing what I had to do, getting through the day. And like, I was like, gonna do work on the side. And there was one day that we went down to the beach after that. I had just talked to the airline, and my mom is like, let's go and get out a little bit. My daughter's like, I want to swim. And I was like, all right, let's go down to the beach and swim. And I got into the water, and I hadn't gotten into the water the whole trip. And I'm sitting there up to my waist with this boogie board, just like letting go. And I was just like, there's not anything else I can do right now. And at that moment, my daughter's sitting there, and I'm helping her learn to boogie board. And then as I'm standing there, this sea turtle just comes up and starts swimming in circles around me. And I was just like, if I had have been clinging, if I had have been trying, it was in those moments of surrender and letting go that I was able to find the beauty in that moment and just sit there and go, I just lost a lot of money on some plane tickets. I just had this challenging thing happen, but right now I'm having a sea turtle swimming laps around me. And
while I'm with my little girl and teaching her how to
with my girl, and my mom sitting on the beach, and it was just this beautiful moment where we were all able to be there together. And she's like, and she was able to extend her ticket. She's like, I get 5 more days with my family, you know?
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And I think, but if I hadn't have been doing the flexing of my resilience up to that point, it would have been even more difficult to handle that situation.
Well, and you adapted, right? I mean, like sometimes it doesn't look like achieving, it looks like allowing. And that can be so hard because we have an idea of what we think things are supposed to be, what we plan them to be. And then when life throws us a curveball, that's when we have that choice. And, you know, it's kind of ironic. I write about it, right? Like I do speeches, I write, I do training. But it happened to me with my book, with this book. It was scheduled to come out this week, actually. And I got the first proof of it, and it wasn't what I wanted it to look like. And I reread it, and I'm like, okay, that story is not as tight as it could be, or that point wasn't as clear as I could have made it. And I really struggled with it because I had publicly told my audience and everyone in my community, like, here's when the book is coming out. And I had it planned. And you don't know me, but I am so goal oriented. It's like I've had to learn not to be as goal oriented. And I found myself fighting it. I was cranky. I was frustrated with my editor and my designer. I was frustrated with myself. I got frustrated with my husband because he was like, okay, so you're writing a book about adaptability. Adapt. I'm like, you don't get it. The book is supposed to be out, right? And so it was one of those things where even though I teach it and practice it and write about it and speak about it, I still was stuck in, but here's what the plan was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Instead of adapting to the plan that needed to be built. And you learned that in the ocean. But lots of people spend their whole life fighting what is, hoping for a different reality. And you can spend your time angry and resentful and exhausted, but those are the muscles you build. So you just end up more angry, resentful, and exhausted. It's not to say bad stuff doesn't happen. Of course it does, right? We're disappointed. Our plans change. Life throws in a curveball when we least expect it. But our ability to pivot when that happens and figure out how we adjust is really the key, I think, to a beautiful life. Because once you can do that, you can make it through anything.
Right. I love that. If you had, I think right now, a lot of it's interesting because the younger generation, especially Gen Z, has gone through some trauma. They were coming up through school in the middle of a pandemic, and now they're in a work world where there's rising inflation, and the world's going kind of crazy around them. What do you think younger people can do to start trying to weather an increasingly unstable world and deal with some of to be fair, I didn't have to go through a pandemic when I was in high school and have the entire world shut down. That's a heck of a thing. What do you think younger people can do to start learning some of this stuff?
It's interesting. My daughter, like I said, is 24. She graduated in 2020 in the height of the pandemic. She went on spring break and never went back to school. And she had worked her since the fourth grade, she had started choir and worked her way up to be the elite of the elite. Like she was the top 8 kids in the entire school in terms of choir. And every year, her goal was to make it to that group so that at the end of the senior year, they could have this amazing performance. And that was her dream the entire time she was in middle school and high school. She waited for this. And then the pandemic hit and it all went away. And she went into this really deep depression. She started having panic attacks. She was anxious all the time. She was retreating into herself. She dropped out of virtual college because she was so overwhelmed with it, to the point where we were really worried about her. And so we put her in we didn't put her, she agreed and thought it was necessary to do a partial outpatient hospitalization. And every day, all day, she was in therapy and she was learning skills and tools. And I watch her now and I thought, if I had had that level of intense skill building and learned how to manage my emotions and my stress so that they didn't manage me, oh my gosh, I would have been able to circumvent so many of the heartaches and hardships that I've gone through. And so what skill can young people build? The skill of learning how to understand their emotions, how to regulate their emotions, how to focus on what matters most and not get lost in the little shit that doesn't, how to make the most of the resources they have. But most importantly, I think the key is we've raised our kids. And I don't know if it's unique to Gen Z, because I remember my mom doing this and I'm Gen X, right? So we've raised our kids to where we solve a lot of their problems, or we don't want them to be uncomfortable or in pain or embarrassed or sad. So we try to fix it for them.
Yeah.
But the real lesson is learning how to live in that discomfort, because life isn't comfortable. And you have these beautiful, happy moments, and those are amazing. Savor them, enjoy them, sit in those moments and hold on to them like they're a secret recipe. But the key, the skill for everyone, not just young people, is learning how to sit in the discomfort, and that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's where the growth happens. That frustration, that friction, it doesn't feel good, but it's where we evolve.
I love that. It is where the growth happens. You think about any type of growth, like someone going to the gym. If you want to get strong, you have to put yourself into discomfort. The discomfort
and tear down the muscle and build it back up. It's the 100%. Same thing with us.
Lifting the weights. And once you start lifting them, it doesn't feel great,
No.
But then you'll feel better afterwards,
Mm-hmm. And you feel stronger and you feel more capable, to where if something else happens, if there's a situation, you can lift something heavy if you need to, right? The same is true with emotions. It's so uncomfortable and we don't like it, so we numb it. We chase external stuff. We use drugs or alcohol or food or shopping or fill in the blank to not feel it. Every time you try not to feel it, it magnifies it.
Yes, it's so true. The best way to have to deal with something in a big way is to start to ignore it. I just know that that's something that affected me. But, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is if you were ever in the situation where you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
That's so funny, because in the book, I write a letter to my younger self.
I love it.
And it's one of the strategies that I suggest that people do. If you could imagine yourself, there's 2 parts to this. So look, if you could imagine yourself, 20 years from now, what would you want the version of you now to know? And if you could have written a letter to yourself 20 years ago, what would you want that person to know? So I wrote a letter to myself and I was like, look, trust yourself. You're going to make good choices. You're going to make bad choices. You're still going to be okay. Right? I wish that I would have known that you can worry until you're sick, because I did. I made myself sick. I got a tumor in my salivary gland. stuff's going to happen anyway. Learn how to, control your thoughts instead of them control you. Movement, right? Don't take your body for granted. I had double fusion back surgery 2 years ago. I wish I could have told myself earlier some things that I could have done to strengthen that. The key is you can't go back, but you can go forward and think about what you wish you would know. And so I encourage everybody, write a letter as if you were your future self. What do you want you now to know? What do you wish you would have learned? What are the important lessons you want to take forward? Because that's a forward-facing form of agency and empowerment, right? We can teach we know what we need to learn. I think that's the key, right? You know what you need to learn. And you know how to do it too. The key is having the belief that you're capable of doing. And that
100%.
comes from that empowerment you feel, that distance you feel when you talk to yourself as if you were somebody else.
Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
So you can go to evolvability.com or annegradygroup.com/evolve. And if you do, there is an evolvability index. It's a way to identify where you are adaptable and where you have some room to develop some of those skills. But absolutely. And the book will be available on Amazon. It was supposed to be next week, but you know what? Life gets in the way. So in February, it will be there, and I've adapted, and it's going to get there when it gets there. That's just how life works.